This week on the video version of the Business of Tech, CISA's first guidance on new reporting requirements, spam of all kinds is up, says all the latest data, 3 states' privacy laws and 1 considering more, cloud spend and strategy data with CISOs coming to the boardroom, Microsoft and ConnectWise make services moves, and actionable lessons for leaders in the world of work. All these stories and more, hit the like and subscribe buttons. It's how we pay the bills, and here are this week's stories. As reporting requirements for cyber breaches were made law last month, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has been hard at work on what the specifics are. The organization has now published a quick guide on what kind of incidents critical infrastructure entities should share with the government. Here are their 10 key elements to share: the incident date and time, the incident location, the type of observed activity, a detailed narrative of the event, the number of people or systems affected, the company organization name, a point of contact with details, the severity of the event, the critical infrastructure sector, if known, and anyone else that you informed. Specifically, the types of activity to share with CISA: unauthorized access to your system, denial of service attacks that last more than 12 hours, malicious code on your systems, including variants, if known, targeted and repeated scans against services on your systems, repeated attempts to gain unauthorized access to your system, email or mobile messages associated with phishing attempts or successes, and ransomware against critical infrastructure, including variant and ransom details, if known. Next up will be some of the specific rules of the reporting. Why do we care? Tactically, either your IT service provider has this down to a science, or this list is your starting point for fixing your process. While I don't have data on it, I have the feeling it's one of these two extremes here. Sure, these are critical infrastructure entities. For now. If you don't think this will spread, my response is you're not paying attention. Assume it doesn't become a legal requirement to law enforcement soon. It will come to your insurance company, or your customer's insurance company. And I suspect, did you report to law enforcement will be one of the questions they ask. It's also clear CISA is moving. That law only passed a month ago. They'll be moving quickly to ensure that guidelines are in place. In what feels like a zombie returning from the dead, per some data items out recently and covered in Axios, spam calls, texts, emails, and social media posts are up. Quoting liberally from Axios, the average American received roughly 42 spam texts just in the month of March, according to new data from RoboKiller, an app that blocks spam calls and texts. There were more spam calls last month than in any of the previous 6 months, per Umail's robocall index. According to a January report from the Washington Post, spam emails rose by 30% from 2020 to 2021. According to data from the Federal Trade Commission, there was an unprecedented increase in social media scams last year. Many of those scams were related to bogus cryptocurrency investments. Why? It's a pandemic symptom because it's working. According to data from the FTC, Americans reported losing $131 million to fraud schemes initiated by text in 2021, a jump of over 50% from the year before. Why do we care? I was surprised spam is on the way up. It's certainly not the attention grabber that ransomware is. Considering the value of these scams and the prevalence of social engineering broadly as an attack vector, worth highlighting this trend. Is it actionable? I think that ensuring your customers are looking at data holistically and understanding the threats posed by scammers leveraging social engineering would be an intelligent positioning. It's easy to burn out one message, like ransomware, so mixing things up keeps the message fresh. And a reminder to keep an eye out for multiple kinds of threats. Last week, I had some big tech trust numbers. Today, the no silver linings report from digital security company Imperva, says that 35% of the 6,700 consumers surveyed do not trust organizations to protect their sensitive information adequately. Of those who responded to the survey, 41% say their trust has decreased over the past 5 years. In addition, the option to not have their personal information shared has many feeling as if their hand is being forced. Nearly two-thirds, 64% of respondents said they feel they have no choice in sharing data when it comes to using online services. The percentage of those surveyed trusting companies by industry when it came to handling data were as follows. Financial services at 37% say they trust, healthcare at 33%, government organizations at 29%, and retailers at 5%. This has led to some users simply giving up when it comes to being concerned about their online presence, as 27% of respondents said they have not bothered to change passwords if their account or website has been compromised. Now, why do we care? Trust is an asset to be managed and a resource not to be squandered. Hoovering up all that data is damaging trust, and we have big tech to thank. Layer on distrust related to security and threat actors, and you have a messy, awkward scenario. That leaves those delivering IT services to recognize that the default position is distrust, not trust. Assume you will not be trusted, which is a powerful position when combined with a zero-trust approach. What do I mean? Take a position ready for a high level of scrutiny and gain trust by not requiring it. Yesterday, we covered CISA's new guidance for reporting of breaches. Today, let's dive into Politico's look at similar reporting requirements around the world. In the EU, members of the European Parliament are seeking to expand their existing program to cover all medium-sized and large organizations that operate within several critical infrastructure sectors. Companies would have 24 hours to submit an initial report about the incident and 1 month to submit a final report. The proposed changes also include fines of at least 10 million euros or 2% of total global revenue for organizations that don't report properly. In the UK, regulators are considering a few of the same changes as the EU and tweaks to what kinds of incidents companies need to report. The UK could also adopt fines and the EU's proposed two-tiered reporting timelines. And in Australia, a new cyber reporting program earlier this month, known as Security Legislation Amendment Critical Infrastructure Act of 2021, gives affected critical infrastructure operators up to 12 hours to share details about a critical incident with the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, one of the tightest reporting timelines globally. While CISA will only focus on significant cyber incidents, Australia's rules require affected entities to report both significant and non-critical incidents. Why do we care? For listeners in those countries, this is the reality on the ground. For those in the US, 2 reasons to care. First, any organization you work with, a customer or vendor, that crosses boundaries falls under these laws too. Second is the broader reason. These other laws become de facto baseline requirements. Note that it's all the calories without the great taste of actual protection. Is that the position we want to be in? A hall of shame company exit here. The smart home company Insteaon has vanished. Quoting Ars Technica, the entire company seems to have abruptly shut down just before the weekend, breaking users' cloud-dependent smart home setups without warning. Users say the service has been down for 3 days now, despite the company's status page displaying all services online. The company forums are down, and no one is replying to users on social media. The company executives have also scrubbed their LinkedIn pages and removed their terms at the company. Why do we care? It's a simple lesson in lousy execution. What happens when a cloud provider goes away entirely? I'm not advocating a move away from the cloud. Instead, I'm observing that it's essential to plan for critical systems potentially going away, or simply recognizing that it will happen. It's part of the reality. Don't just ignore that reality, but instead acknowledge it. Multiple privacy laws to update you about. In California, lawmakers have debated and are considering new privacy laws for children. The rules are similar to what's happening in the UK, and once passed, it's expected that other states will follow suit. Arizona recently amended its breach notice law to change the regulator notification requirements. Starting this summer, depending on the scope of the incident, the Arizona Department of Homeland Security will need to be notified. Specifically, as amended, if more than 1,000 individuals in Arizona are notified of a breach, the notification must be made to the 3 largest consumer reporting agencies, the Arizona Attorney General, and the Arizona Department of Homeland Security. Utah passed the Utah Consumer Privacy Act, which takes effect on December 31st, 2023. The law applies to controllers or processors that do more than $25 million and control the data of more than 100,000 consumers, or derive over 50% of revenue from the sale of personal data and have more than 25,000 records. Virginia just amended their law with 3 new additions. First, a right to delete was added. Second, the Independent Consumer Privacy Fund was abolished, and fees now go right into the state treasury. And the third redefined nonprofit to include political organizations. Why do we care? Welcome to the future, full of multiple sets of regulation for data to be managed. This happens when laws are done at the state level rather than the federal one. Sure, that complexity is good for lawyers and tech services firms who have a clear opportunity to help companies navigate this. It's not as good for consumers, aka customers. I could make a pretty solid argument that it's also not good for those tech services firms. Helping manage this is an SG&A expense, not a revenue-enhancing one, making it less than ideal for a technology spend. I'd instead trade those short-term complexity gains for the long-term simplicity, freeing resources to focus on moves that enhance income for customers, not cut expenses. Linode, a top infrastructure as a service provider, has resources specifically for helping MSPs explore the alternative cloud. Discover this growing market, one of the best kept secrets in building a scalable, thriving, modern managed services provider business. Learn about the cloud provider landscape, improving KPIs, security, and more in Linode's free ebook, The MSP's Guide to Modern Cloud Infrastructure, available now. This resource and more at linode.com/MSP Radio. Microsoft is upping its bug bounties for high-impact bugs in Office 365. Per the Register, the new scenario-based payouts to the Dynamics 365 and Power Platform Bounty Program and M365 Bounty Program aim to incentivize bug hunters to focus on finding vulnerabilities with the highest potential impact on customer privacy and security, Microsoft said late last week. Awards will increase as much as 30% in some cases. Google released its Project Zero report for 2021, highlighting 58 cases of zero-day exploits in the wild last year. That's more than double the previous maximum of 28 in 2015. The good news is that this is likely due to better reporting. The bad news is that attacker methodology hasn't had to change much from previous years. That's just the exploits. New threat research from Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks found that 99% of cloud identities were overly permissive. To come to that staggering percentage, the researchers considered a cloud identity overly permissive if it was granted permissions that were unused in the past 60 days. And according to Palo Alto, 65% of observed security incidents are due to misconfiguration. Sticking to security, a report by CyberCatch highlights how SMB companies are more vulnerable to ransomware attacks. Why? Limited resources. 30% said they don't have a written incident response plan to respond to cyber threats such as ransomware attacks. Among those with this type of plan, 35% last tested it more than 6 months ago. Some 20% of the respondents said they don't have offline backups of critical data that could be encrypted in an attack. And 34% said they don't give employees phishing tests to determine their risk exposure. That adds up to 75% of respondents saying they would survive only 3 to 7 days following a successful ransomware attack. Plus, ransomware attackers are getting a lot faster. According to data published in Mandiant's M-Trends 2022 report, the average dwell time of FIN12 campaigns, meaning the amount of time between criminal hackers gaining initial access to the network and triggering the ransomware attack, has dropped from 5 to less than 2 days. Why? FIN12 doesn't focus on finding sensitive data and stealing it before triggering the attack. Adding to the scariness, Intuit QuickBooks' March 2022 poll says more than 40% of SMBs surveyed have been hit with a cybersecurity breach. In good news, ransom distributed denial of service attacks are way down. Cloudflare reports that ransom DDoS attacks have dropped drastically in 2022, with only 17% of its DDoS-targeted clients reporting extortion in January, 6% in February, and just 3% in March. That's a 28% decrease year over year, and a 52% decrease compared to the last quarter of 2021, when ransom DDoS attacks spiked at 28% in the previous month. Now, why do we care? There's something seriously broken in the financial incentives in this space. It's not news, I just want to bring it back to that point. The bug bounties paid by companies are an order of magnitude lower than those paid on the threat actor side, and it's clear that the attackers at all levels are measuring success based on payouts. While we don't know why ransom DDoS attacks are down, I'd suspect that payouts are not as good. FIN12 figured out that they could make the money they wanted based on speed, not data ransom. Be pretty logical to think those DDoS attacks are down because they don't pay as well. Follow the money remains the name of the game. 3 stories to pull together today. First, the Wall Street Journal has a piece on corporate cloud spending. It's rising at double-digit rates. Per some new Gartner data released Tuesday, companies worldwide this year are expected to spend an estimated $494.7 billion on cloud computing, up 20% from 2021, and such spending is on pace to reach $600 billion by the end of this year. Spending on infrastructure as a service, which is a cloud computing service that provides companies with on-demand computing, storage, and networking resources, is forecast to show the highest growth of any cloud category in this year at 31%, Gartner said. Second, Deloitte released its 3rd annual Chief Strategy Officer Survey. Sure, 84% surveyed say advanced technologies such as intelligent automation, predictive analytics, machine learning, and mixed reality will play an increased role as strategic enablers for their businesses, and then almost half said they don't have the mature skills to do it. Finally, an opinion piece I spotted from several sources and linked to Forbes, titled, "The SEC is about to force CISOs into America's boardrooms." The core premise is that just as the SEC pushed financial reporting via the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, the agency is proposing new rules that would require U.S. public company boardroom disclosure of corporate directors with cybersecurity experience. The proposed regulations focus on expertise, not by job title, but by the depth of experience, competencies, and formal education on these issues. Why do we care? There's a thread of expertise here that's striking to me. Cloud spend is up because it moves infrastructure spending outside the organization to experts. The SEC is focused on bringing experts into the room to address cyber. And there's a dearth of advanced technology skills. Expertise. Considering a skills enhancement is probably a smart move at both a personal and company level. There's an opportunity to take advantage of the security and these advanced technologies skill gap. So, 2 similar things I spotted. First, per Channel ED, Microsoft has launched a free business consultation service that features one-on-one meetings between the technology giant and small business owners and customers. The one-on-one sessions are 60-minute engagements over video, chat, or audio, and if you need more time, you can schedule a follow-up during the original call. There was no mention of partner involvement. Second, ConnectWise launched the ConnectWise Incident Response Service. From the press release, the service provides direct, around-the-clock access to a team of expert cybersecurity analysts to provide immediate assistance to assess, contain, and remediate threats to minimize impact and business disruption. The service also aids in the recovery process with forensic examination of system data, user activity, and artifacts of digital evidence to determine the extent of the compromise and identify which threat actor might be involved. I inquired about pricing. Delivered as a retainer service, the cost is $300 per hour, purchased in blocks of 20 hours. Now, why do we care? Starting with ConnectWise, in discussions with investors about the company and in one of my What I Tell Investors video, I offered that I suspected ConnectWise would focus more on services. They have other pieces of that puzzle in both acquisitions and offerings, particularly the former Zenith Infotech / Continuum NOC, a resource that will likely never be recreated again. It's an interesting differentiator. I'm less convinced it has the margins and scalability that the organization may want from an investment standpoint, and yet has potential for the providers themselves. Microsoft's move is similar as a services play. Microsoft doesn't make moves without intention. This should be a wake-up call to the MSP market that the company doesn't believe enough good advice is getting to customers. Instead of complaining about them going direct, perhaps acknowledging this is a gap in the market that they've identified would be a smarter move. And an opportunity for comment. Per NextGov, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is asking for feedback over the next month on preliminary documents that they publish to help agencies implement logging and other security measures under order from Congress and the Biden administration. Comments are due May 19th on a technical reference architecture for secure cloud business applications and a program guidebook for an extensible visibility reference framework that the agency published Wednesday, noting risks associated with using specific cloud services. Why do we care? Two very tactical reasons. First, these are resources specifically designed to help IT services companies, and you should use them. Second, expertise is required to input here, and this is your chance to do so. I'm only talking about back to work once this week, and it's to check on the data. More than a third of knowledge workers, at 34%, are now working from the office 5 days a week. Still, employee sentiment has dropped to near record lows, including worse scores on work-related stress, anxiety, and work-life balance. That, according to the Future Forum Pulse survey. Workers are facing more of the strain of the return-to-office era than their bosses. That non-executives' work-life balance scores are now 40% worse than those of their bosses. Only about 1 in 5 knowledge workers say they want to work in the office full-time, yet 35% are making the 5-day-a-week commute, compared to 19% of executives. Non-executive employees are nearly twice as likely as execs to be making the daily commute to the office. This from ZDNet. Plus, in new research from Asana, a new feature of work that's making it harder to get things done. Instead of doing the work they were employed to do, the survey claims that workers find themselves spending half their time doing work about work, which means chasing updates or switching between apps. Global professionals spend 58% of their time on menial tasks, which Asana labeled work about work, which includes activities such as work communications, searching for information, switching between apps, managing priorities, and chasing status updates. In contrast, just 33% of their time is spent on skilled, i.e. meaningful work, while a pitiful 9% of the day is dedicated to strategic work towards significant goals. Workers are losing approximately 3 hours per week on meetings alone. Little wonder why nearly a quarter, at 24% of respondents, said too many meetings directly leads to missed deadlines. And the final injustice of the day? Per research from the University of Calgary and University of Pennsylvania, researchers focusing on understanding the failure of systems, quote, found that when supervisors were told that the employee's lack of effort and a system malfunction were equally responsible for the poor outcome, they still blamed the employee most. Why do we care? These data points feel very actionable for both owners and leaders in IT services organizations. The distance between executives and workers, the wasted energy of work about work, and the willingness of managers to ignore failed systems and instead blame employees all feels incredibly actionable. I focus as much as I do on the change of work because of the opportunity it presents to change norms. The CDC has launched a new center that will forecast infectious disease outbreaks. The Center for Forecasting and Outbreak Analytics is, quote, the equivalent of the National Weather Service for infectious diseases, the agency said Tuesday. This project started back in August with the first dedicated disease forecasting program. Why do we care? This makes data actionable. I wanted to cover this for two reasons. First, the U.S. having predictive data for infectious diseases makes such sense after the last 2 years. I'd expect this to be consumed by business leaders just for the data itself. Second, it's a great example of applying data to help make decisions. Forecasting, looking forward rather than back. Think about organizations that ingest weather data and make decisions. Same here too. And two more pieces of legalese to care about. A U.S. appeals court has ruled that scraping publicly accessible data is legal. This is a long-lasting battle brought by LinkedIn against another company scraping public profiles. The case originally reached the Supreme Court, but was sent back to the Ninth Circuit for review. In its second ruling on Monday, the Ninth Circuit reaffirmed its original decision and found that scraping data that is publicly accessible on the internet is not a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, or CFAA, which governs what constitutes computer hacking under U.S. law. Of note, a gate-up, gate-down analogy. The Supreme Court said that when a computer or website's gates are up, information is publicly accessible, and no authorization is required. That analogy may be important. Representative Ted Lieu is introducing the Warrant for Metadata Act, which would require agencies to get court approval to access metadata from cloud service providers. This one is from the Washington Post. While there are limits on how the government can track a person's location, metadata can render those protections irrelevant. Why do we care? I've talked about warrants before. Protecting metadata seems savvy to me. Data privacy is getting both potential laws and legal precedent, slowly but surely. The analogy I found interesting is the intention of the data viewed as in front or behind a gate. Keep that one in mind. Thanks for your time and attention. Time is a finite resource, and I really value you giving me some of yours. If you like this video, you can let me know with a like of the video, and even more valuable, hitting the subscription button. My content is all free, and I use metrics like subscriptions to pay the bills, so it has real value. The content here is produced under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you're interested in more content like this, you can get access to content early via our Patreon at patreon.com/MSPradio. It's our give what you want model where you set the value of what you think the content is worth. If you like this podcast, you can catch it daily as the 5-minute news and commentary show, The Business of Tech, available on all your favorite podcatchers with links at businessof.tech. Just hit that big blue button to subscribe. Again, thank you for taking time out of your day to listen, and I really value the interaction. If you want to say something in the comments, I do respond and watch all that, and I look forward to talking to you next time.